They handed my crown to a man with no royal blood, and my own betrothed crossed the hall to stand at his side. They expected me to kneel, scrawl my name on a paper, and keep funding their new king as if nothing had happened. Their new prince was already grinning when Princess Seraphine slid the continuity charter in front of me, and all I had to do was put ink on the line. That document would turn their betrayal into law. And it would also hand over my ports, my patents, and my private guarantees to Lucien and Vale, the palace ward they now called my elder brother. Celeste had helped draft it. I could see her tiny notes in the margin beneath the hand that had worn my ring for 7 years. What none of them understood was that the crown did not actually own the system keeping its fleet at sea. They had been borrowing my credit, my engineers, and my silence for years. I caught a pale watermark in the paper. A wrong impression in the wax, and one clause that proved this plan had been cooked up months before that night. I looked at the 5 women who raised me, the woman who promised to marry me, and the man sitting in my chair. "Fine," I said, and then I took back the pen they thought I would use. Lucien was already parked beneath my father's carved falcon when I entered the Hall of Crowns. That was the first warning. The chair was not the throne by law, nobody could occupy it until the assembly confirmed a successor. The smaller chair under the falcon belonged to the named crown prince, and for 11 years it had been mine. My 5 sisters stood behind it in order of age, all dressed like officials instead of siblings. Seraphine wore the silver chain of the royal council, Beatrice clutched the treasury portfolio against her blue gown, and Helena had the white sash of the treaty office. Marianne had brought 3 editors from the Royal Gazette, and Isolde stood beside General Orand, who supervised royal weapons purchases. They had not gathered as sisters, they had gathered as a government. Celeste stood at the right side of the hall, and she did not look at me when I approached. The ruby engagement pin I had given her was missing from her collar, and the peers, admirals, judges, and city delegates watched me cross the floor in dead silence. My boots sounded unreasonably loud against the black stone, and every step felt like walking into a trap I had already sprung. Seraphine lifted a folded parchment. "Prince Rowan," she said, "the Royal Council has completed its review of the succession records." I stopped 12 feet from Lucien, who had grown up in the palace after his father, the king's chamberlain, died. We had studied navigation together, broken the same stable window, and served on the same frigate during our first summer at sea. He knew exactly whose chair he was occupying, and yet he didn't flinch. "You could have invited me to the review," I said. "Your interests made your presence inappropriate," she replied, as if my own inheritance had nothing to do with me. "My interests are the subject of the review," I shot back, but Seraphine's expression remained as calm as ice. She had used that same calm face when I was 9, telling me my mother's funeral procession would continue without waiting for me. She called it strength. It usually meant the decision had already been made. She opened the parchment and read a declaration dated during the 3rd year of the Maritime War. It stated that I had voluntarily surrendered my succession rights in exchange for unrestricted command of the Northern Fleet and lifetime possession of Hiromir. The declaration carried my name, a red royal seal, and a signature that looked almost like mine, but only almost. I had signed hundreds of supply orders during that winter, sleeping in chart rooms and eating beside warehouse scales. I had never surrendered my birthright, not once. Seraphine produced a second document, claiming our father had privately acknowledged Lucien as his natural son and authorized the council to legitimize him if I renounced the succession. My sisters had not merely chosen a different candidate. They had created one from scratch. The council therefore recognizes Prince Lucien as provisional crown prince, Seraphine announced, and applause began among the household officials. It spread unevenly through the hall, but Lucien was already smiling like he owned the place. He wore a naval coat with gold cuffs, though he had left active service after only 2 years. "Rowan, this does not need to divide us," he said, as if he hadn't just stolen my seat. "Then get out of my chair," I answered, and several delegates inhaled sharply. Marianne's editors bent over their notebooks, and Lucien's smile tightened into a thin line. "The chair belongs to the office," he said. "That is the first accurate thing said tonight," I replied, and Seraphine warned me with a look that could cut glass. "The realm has survived 6 years of war, it cannot survive a public fight between brothers," she said. "We are not brothers," I reminded her, but she waved the king's declaration as if it proved everything. "My father is not here to answer for that declaration," I said, because he had died 3 months earlier after a short fever, leaving the kingdom in mourning and the succession unfinished. His death had created the opening, but it did not prove what they claimed he had done while alive. Beatrice stepped forward, her voice sharp and businesslike. "The financial markets open tomorrow, 3 foreign delegations are waiting for a recognized heir. Every hour of uncertainty has a cost. Then you should have avoided using a false signature, I said, and the room became still again. Seraphine handed the declaration to the chief clerk, who carried it toward me on a velvet board. Lucien shifted his right hand as the clerk passed, and for a moment his thumb covered the lower corner of the sheet. When the page reached me, I understood why a pale crown falcon appeared inside the paper whenever the parchment tilted toward the chandeliers. I had seen the same watermark on new shipyard invoices that spring, introduced by the Crown Paper Mill after the war to discourage contract fraud. The declaration was dated 18 months before that watermark existed, but I did not announce that discovery, not yet. Instead, I examined the signature. My name ended in a long upward stroke, but I had used a short square ending on every wartime document, so hurried signatures could be matched to my brass command token. Whoever copied my peacetime hand had not known that. I returned the board, and Seraphine appeared relieved. She mistook my patience for surrender because I had allowed her to make that mistake for most of my life. Celeste finally moved, crossing the space between us to place my ruby pin on the table beside the charter. I was told about the final determination this morning, she said, her voice steady and rehearsed. Were you? I asked, but she didn't answer the question. I cannot enter a marriage that threatens the continuity of the realm. Lucien has asked me to remain in royal service as his future consort, and I have accepted. Not one word about 7 years together, not one word about the coastal hospitals we had planned or the house she had chosen in Hiromir. She spoke as if moving from one prince to another were just an adjustment to a seating chart. Lucien descended from the platform and offered her his hand, and she took it. That hurt more than the chair, but it also made the truth simpler. Seraphine signaled the clerk to bring me a third document, the Continuity Charter. Its opening clauses asked me to recognize Lucien and promise public cooperation. The later clauses transferred management of Haramir's 3 shipyards to the crown. They granted the royal household permanent use of my hull bracing patents and continued my personal guarantee on 6 million crowns of war debt. There was a note beside the shipyard clause in Celeste's precise handwriting. Temporary voting authority should pass upon recognition, subject to later consolidation. She had not learned of this that morning. She had helped design it. Sign, Beatrice said quietly. Your estates remain protected if you cooperate. Protected from whom? I asked, but no one answered. I looked at Celeste. Did you review the trust annex? Her eyes shifted for the first time. This is not the place for private accounts. You made our engagement part of a succession announcement. There is no private account left, I said, and I removed the small iron key from my signet chain. That key opened the box containing my registered seals at the Admiralty. By custom, the Crown Prince carried it at all public sessions. I set it beside her ruby pin. Fine, I said, and Lucien relaxed. Seraphine extended the pen, but I did not take it. Fine, I repeated. Celeste may choose you. My sisters may recommend you. Every person in this hall may applaud you. But my property, my name, and my signature are not included in their choice. I turned to the chief clerk. Enter my objection in the public record. I deny signing the renunciation. I challenge the alleged acknowledgement of Lucien. I reject the Continuity Charter. And under Article 22 of the Betrothal Trust Act, I terminate Lady Celeste's authority over every asset held pending our marriage. Celeste went pale, and Seraphine stepped toward me. You cannot make financial threats in the Hall of Crowns. I made no threat. I stopped giving away what belongs to me, I said. The chief clerk hesitated, but I said, write it. He looked toward Seraphine, then toward the judges seated along the western wall. The oldest judge gave one small nod, and the clerk began to write. Before I left, I lifted my signet key from the table. The office was disputed, but the seals registered to me were not behind me. Lucien called my name, but I kept walking. For the first time in 32 years, I left my family to manage the consequences of its own decision. The Admiralty doors had been locked before I reached them, which told me the announcement had not been arranged that morning either. 2 palace guards stood beneath the stone anchor above the entrance, and Captain Elias Kent waited between them with his hands clasped behind his back. He had served as my executive officer at the Battle of Red Shoals and once carried me across a burning deck after a pulley split my shoulder that night. He did not salute. The council suspended your access to succession-restricted records, he said. My registered seals are not succession records. No, they are in your private cabinet. You may retrieve them with 2 witnesses, he replied, and the guards expected anger. Elias expected an order that would force him to choose between me and his oath, but I did not give him one. Walk with me, I said, and he escorted me through offices I had supervised for 11 years. Clerks looked down as I passed, because news traveled through government buildings faster than smoke through rigging. By then, they knew I had lost a crown, a fiancé, or both. My cabinet contained 4 seals, the brass command token from the Northern Fleet, and a stack of blank certification forms. I counted every item while Elias and a records clerk watched, then I signed the withdrawal register. I need the current supply schedule, I said, and the clerk glanced at Elias. It is not restricted, Elias said. Give it to him. The schedule showed 18 active contracts for grain, sailcloth, timber, iron, medicine, and wages, 11 signed by the Crown, 7 backed by Hiromir or by me personally because the Treasury had exceeded its wartime credit limit. Those 7 contracts had capped ships at sea while Beatrice postponed taxes and Seraphine promised Parliament that the war would pay for itself. I copied their expiration dates, and Elias asked, "Are you going to cancel them?" "No, sailors did not choose Lucien," I said, and his shoulders loosened slightly. "I will honor every shipment already authorized," I continued, "but no renewal, expansion, or replacement contract may use my guarantee without new written consent. That will create a gap in 6 weeks. The Treasury has 6 weeks to pay for the government it claims to control." I sent identical notices to the Admiralty, Treasury, 3 banks, and every supplier, no secret instructions. No midnight withdrawal, just clear letters distinguishing existing public obligations from future private support. Then I went to the Engineers Guild, where Master Horace Bell had led the team that developed my interlocking hull brace. That design let a frigate survive damage that would have broken older ships in half. Father had funded the first prototypes, Hiromir had funded the failed second and third versions, and Horace with 12 engineers had contributed registered improvements. Lucien's continuity charter treated all of it as royal property, but Horace read my copy twice and grunted, "Did they ask the guild?" "No." "Did they ask you?" "They handed me a pen," I said. "That is not the same process," he replied, and we placed the original patent books in the guild vault. I did not remove Crown access to designs already licensed for active ships. I did suspend certification for 6 new hulls that had not been paid for or legally commissioned. By midnight, I had reclaimed my seals, separated my guarantees, protected the patent records, and requested certified copies of the 3 documents read in the hall. I returned to my townhouse expecting silence, but Celeste was waiting in the library. She had kept a key because the house was supposed to become ours after the wedding, and 2 servants stood near the door, uncertain whether she was still mistress of the household. "Please leave us," she told them. "They work for me," I said. "They can decide whether they prefer to remain." Both stayed, and Celeste drew a slow breath. "Must you turn every sentence into a contest? You changed fiancés in front of the national government." "A clear sentence seems useful," I said. "The decision was made before I entered the hall. If I had refused Lucien, the council would still have named him." "That explains his position, it does not explain yours," I said, and she approached the desk. "I spent 7 years preparing to serve beside the next king. I built relationships with ambassadors, studied revenue law, and surrendered offers that would have given me an independent household. Then I learned you signed away the succession years ago." "You saw that declaration before tonight," I said, and her pause was brief but enough. "I saw a summary. You wrote notes on the continuity charter because Seraphine asked me to protect your position. You suggested immediate transfer of the shipyard shares." "Temporary transfer," she said. "You would have retained income. Income from property I could no longer control. You would still be Duke of Hiromir and Grand Admiral. Lucien is willing to guarantee both titles for life." There it was, the offer they thought would bring me back into line, keep the outward symbols if I surrendered the authority beneath them. "Lucien cannot guarantee a title he does not lawfully hold," I said. "The council recognizes him. The assembly has not." "The assembly will follow the council unless you create a crisis," she said, and she opened her leather case to remove a private copy of the charter with a narrow blue ribbon marking the signature page. "Sign before the markets open," she urged. "The council will describe tonight as a dignified transfer. You can protect the fleet, the estates, and your sisters. You can protect me. You accepted another man's proposal. I accepted a duty, and you want me to finance it." For the first time, irritation broke through her discipline. "Do you want everything we built to become meaningless because of pride?" I opened the bottom desk drawer and removed our betrothal trust, which she had signed beside me 7 years earlier. Clause 9 gave her temporary voting authority over 12% of Hiromir Naval Works while we prepared to combine our households. Clause 22. stated that either party's public acceptance of another marriage offer terminated every unvested benefit automatically. I turned the document toward her. Our work did not become meaningless, it became finished. The trust can be amended by both parties. I will not amend it, I said. You chose the position you wanted, you do not also get the assets attached to the man you left. I asked the senior servant to inventory every item Celeste had brought to the house and arrange delivery to her father's residence. She stared at me as if I had ordered her into the street. You would throw away 7 years in one night. No, you made your decision before tonight, I am simply refusing to spend another year pretending you did not. She gathered the charter with unsteady hands, and at the door she looked back. When the banks panic and the fleet misses payroll, everyone will know you caused it. The notices preserve every current payment, I said. People will not read the notices, they will read the Gazette. That was not a warning, it was part of the plan. At dawn, Marianne's headline appeared across the capital: Disgraced Prince threatens fleet after lawful succession. Below it, the article claimed I had withdrawn all military support in a fit of jealousy. I placed my supply schedule beside the paper. They had moved from taking my inheritance to blaming me for the cost of refusing to fund the theft. I sent the schedule to every city editor not controlled by my sister, and then I prepared to make this dispute impossible to bury inside the family. The court of succession met in a circular chamber with no royal symbols, and that absence mattered. Seraphine could command a hall full of household officials, but she could not command judges whose offices predated our dynasty. I filed 3 petitions at 9 in the morning. The first challenged the authenticity of my alleged renunciation, the second requested a temporary order preventing Lucien from receiving national military oaths. The third barred any transfer of Hiromir property until ownership could be adjudicated. Seraphine arrived before noon with 6 royal advocates and a sealed request to dismiss all 3. Lucien did not attend. Provisional crown princes rarely appeared at preliminary hearings. Their lawyers claimed dignity, but I thought distance made lying easier. Chief Judge Amara Vin read my petition in silence, and she was 70 years old, having once fined my father for removing a city magistrate without a hearing. He complained about her for a month, then appointed her chief judge because nobody else had dared apply the law to him. Seraphine's lead advocate rose. The recognition of royal children and the voluntary settlement of succession are matters of sovereign household authority. Then why does the charter transfer commercial property? Judge Vin asked. To preserve national defense. Why does it transfer a private betrothal trust? The trust was designed in anticipation of a royal marriage, a marriage that will not occur. The advocate said, glancing toward Seraphine. I placed the certified continuity charter on the evidence table. The council cannot call this a private family decision when it reaches into banks, shipyards, patents, customs, and military command. Seraphine stood. My brother is inviting judges to decide who governs the realm. No, I said, I am asking judges to determine whether my signature is mine, and if they find against you, I will accept a lawful finding. That answer unsettled her more than defiance. She had expected me to claim birthright placed me above review, but instead I placed my claim inside a process that would also bind me. The judges examined the renunciation, and I did not mention the watermark immediately. First, I established the document's claimed origin, custody, and date. The royal advocate stated that it had remained in a sealed succession box since the 3rd year of the war. Who opened the box? I asked. The Royal Council Archive Committee. On what date? 6 weeks ago. Who was present? Seraphine, Beatrice, Helena, Celeste, and 2 clerks. Celeste had told me she saw only a summary. The official answer placed her in the room when the document appeared, and I allowed that statement to enter the record without comment. Judge Vin ordered the parchment transferred to the Royal Seal Office for independent examination. And she also ordered the council to produce the box registry, archive access log, and every copy made after opening. Seraphine objected, but the judge said irrelevant correspondence could be redacted by a court officer, disputed pages could not. On the military issue, the court reached a narrower decision. It did not remove Lucien's provisional title, but it prohibited him from receiving irreversible national oaths until the document review ended. Palace guards could serve him, but the armed forces could not yet swear personal allegiance. The judge struck a small bell. The defendant may use the style provisional crown prince. No proclamation shall omit the word provisional. Seraphine's face did not change, but her right hand closed around the edge of the table. By evening, printed notices appeared at every barracks in Port. Lucien still had the chair, but he had lost the illusion that the chair was permanent. My property petition went to the Commercial Charter Court, and there, Celeste's public acceptance of Lucien created an immediate result. The betrothal trust was registered, the language was plain, and 300 guests had witnessed her choice. The court restored my 12% voting interest in Hiromir Naval Works and suspended every instruction she had issued under the trust during the previous month. One of those instructions had authorized a review of confidential patent files by the Royal Treaty Office. Celeste had accessed my engineering records before she claimed to know our engagement was over. The ruling reached Hiromir before sunset. And my steward changed the board registry and removed her signing code from the shipyard accounts. That was the first thing they truly lost, not a promise, not a future title, but a voting block they had expected to control. The next morning, Beatrice came to the commercial court after the order was issued and found me on the steps surrounded by reporters. "Do you understand what you have done?" she asked. "Recovered my shares. The Treasury planned to use the shipyard consolidation as collateral for tomorrow's bond renewal. Then the Treasury planned to pledge property it did not own. The bonds pay for coastal defense. Some of them do, the rest refinance palace debt that you have not submitted to the Assembly." Her expression told me I had guessed correctly. During the war, every emergency loan had been listed by purpose. After the armistice, Beatrice had combined old military debt with royal household spending. I had continued guaranteeing renewals because I believed the temporary arrangement protected the kingdom's credit, but they had treated that guarantee as a permanent resource. "You signed the original instruments," she said. "And I will honor them until expiration. Refusing renewal is not the same as default, it means the borrower must present its own accounts." She lowered her voice. "If the banks inspect everything, they will freeze construction, demand new taxes, and expose decisions father approved during the war. Then provide the records and defend the decisions. You know government cannot function with every compromise dragged into daylight. This government just dragged my engagement into the Hall of Crowns." Reporters leaned closer, and Beatrice noticed them and stepped back. "You are enjoying this," she said. "I was not. My family had stolen my name, and the woman I loved had calculated the value of leaving me. Enjoyment was too simple, what I felt was relief. For years, every crisis had arrived at my door already wrapped in duty. There had always been a reason I needed to sign, pay, forgive, or wait. The moment I stopped, my sisters did not ask how to replace my support, they accused me of stealing it from them. "No," I said, "I am finally measuring it." The next morning, North Coast Bank delivered a disclosure demand to the Treasury. Without my future guarantee, the bank required a complete list of alternative collateral supporting Lucien's new administration. By noon, a second bank filed the same demand. Both had been promised priority over the same future customs revenue, and neither knew about the other. The crown they placed on Lucien's head had been financed twice. By the fourth day, the Treasury had stopped calling the duplicate customs pledges an error, it called them a misunderstanding between lenders. North Coast Bank held a contract granting first claim over customs collected at Leiden, Westmere, and St. Orlan for 8 years. Crown and Anchor Bank held another contract granting the same claim over the same ports for 6 years. Both documents carried Lucien's provisional seal, and both had been witnessed by Beatrice's deputy. The money had not disappeared. One loan refinanced maturing war bonds, the other funded Lucien's accession ceremonies, embassy gifts, and the first payment on 6 new frigates. The problem was not that every crown had been stolen, the problem was that the government had promised the same income twice, then expected my guarantee to hide the shortage. Lucien called a press conference on the palace steps. "Temporary overlap is common during a transition," he told Marianne's editors. "Prince Rowan's abrupt withdrawal created unnecessary concern, but the crown will fulfill every obligation." He had learned Seraphine's favorite trick. Describe my refusal to rescue their decision as the cause of the decision. The Gazette printed his statement above a drawing of sailors staring at empty bowls. I answered with numbers at the Admiralty's public accounts room. I posted every active supply contract, its funding source, its expiration date, and the authority responsible for renewal. I included no secret routes or quantities. I included enough for any merchant, sailor, or legislator to see that food and wages remained funded for 6 weeks. Then I added a second list showing palace renovations, ceremonial uniforms, diplomatic banquets, and private royal travel charged to the same debt pool as coastal defense. Beatrice demanded the accounts room remove it. But Chief Auditor Gideon Shaw refused. The items were submitted as military liabilities, and if the Treasury now considered them private, it could amend the classification and identify another payer. Beatrice could not remove the list without admitting the classifications were false, and she could not leave it without showing the public where the money had gone. For 3 days, merchants and families crowded the accounts room. Sailors discovered their ration contracts were safe, and taxpayers discovered that a palace ballroom roof had been refinanced as storm damage to a naval warehouse. Marianne accused me of exposing sensitive state spending. But I asked her which enemy had been waiting to learn the price of imported chandeliers. That answer appeared in 6 independent newspapers. Lucien summoned me to the palace library, where he stood beside my father's collection of navigational maps wearing the provisional prince's silver sash. No clerks attended, 2 guards remained outside the open door. "You always wanted accounts to be clean," he said. "I can give you that authority." He placed an appointment order on the table naming me Grand Admiral for life and granting me supervision over military reform. In exchange, he asked for public recognition of the succession, renewal of the bond guarantee for 12 months, and patent authorization for the 6 frigates. "You promised 2 banks the same customs revenue," I said. "Beatrice's office handled the instruments, your seal is on both." I was assured the first would be retired before the second took effect. Was it? He turned away. "Transitions require flexibility." "That means no," I said. Lucien rested both hands on father's chart table. "Do you think he would have wanted this? A public audit of every wartime choice? Our creditors circling the palace? Our enemies reading that the royal children cannot agree? Father taught me never to navigate by a chart I knew was false." "Father treated you like the only child who mattered," he said, and the anger in his voice was older than the forged declaration. "He gave you the fleet, Hiromir, a seat in council, and Celeste. I spent my life close enough to see everything and too far away to touch it. So you decided proximity was ownership. I decided ability should matter more than birth. Then submit your ability to an honest vote." He laughed once. "You can afford honesty, the law begins with your name at the top. The law also lets me challenge that name, I have done so." I pushed the appointment order back. "You do not want me as Grand Admiral, you want my signature beneath your title. You will come back when the fleet needs you. The fleet has me, you do not." On my way out, I passed Celeste in the West Corridor, carrying a portfolio marked with the Treaty Office seal. "The Northern delegation postponed its audience," she said. "They will not sign a ship purchase agreement while the patents are disputed. That is a sensible commercial decision. 3 years of negotiation may collapse. You should have checked who owned the design before offering it." Her jaw tightened. "The design was developed during royal service, partly. The guild hearing will determine the rest. Horace Bell owes his workshop to royal funding. Then present the funding records. You know how this looks. Yes, you promised foreign buyers something you did not control." She took one step closer. "Do not pretend this is only about procedure, you want me punished for choosing the future. You are not being punished for choosing Lucien, you are losing access to me." For 7 years, Celeste had known where I kept every useful record, which officials would accept my call, and which merchants trusted my word. She thought ending our engagement changed our public relationship while preserving her private route to all of it. I moved past her. That afternoon, the Northern delegation requested a direct meeting with the Engineers Guild. They did not transfer their support to me, they protected their own money. That distinction mattered. The Guild scheduled the public hearing for the following Monday, and Seraphine responded with a royal decree declaring every military invention produced during the war presumptive property of the Crown, her first attempt to take by authority what I had refused to surrender by signature. The Engineers Guild met inside an old cannon foundry where every wall carried the scars of work. Seraphine sent the Attorney General, Lucien sent 3 naval designers who had recently joined his staff, and Celeste sat with the foreign delegation. I appeared with Horace Bell and 11 engineers whose names were written inside the disputed patent books. The Crown's argument sounded simple: Father had funded wartime research, I had directed it while serving as Crown Prince and Admiral. Therefore, every resulting design belonged to the Crown. If that claim succeeded, Seraphine could take not only the interlocking brace but every tool, process, and improvement produced at Hiromir during 6 years of war. I did not claim the opposite extreme, I acknowledged the government's money. We submitted the original appropriation orders for the first prototype and the Crown's permanent license for every ship already built from that design. Then Horace opened the failure ledger. The second prototype had split during pressure testing. Hiromir paid for the replacement timber and compensation to the injured workers. The third added too much weight and was abandoned, my estate paid for it. The fourth included 6 separate improvements registered by Guild engineers, the fifth became the final brace, developed after the original royal appropriation had closed. The crown owns what it purchased, I told the guild masters. It does not own every later thought of every person who once accepted a royal coin. Isolde leaned toward the hearing table. The realm was at war, those engineers worked because sailors were dying. Horace faced her. That is why we licensed the fleet without profit for the duration of hostilities. The war ended 19 months ago. National defense did not end. Neither did our right to be paid. The Attorney General produced Seraphine's new decree, and Guildmaster Pell read it slowly. This order was issued 4 days after the ownership dispute began. It clarifies existing royal authority, the Attorney General said. A clarification does not change the date on a patent, Pell replied. Celeste requested permission to speak for the treaty office. Describing the Northern Agreement, the jobs it would create, and the diplomatic damage if the 6 frigates were delayed. She was persuasive, she always had been. Then Guildmaster Pell asked whether she had disclosed the ownership dispute to the northern buyers before promising delivery. Celeste said the Royal Council had assured her the transfer would be completed. Completed by whom? Pell asked, and her eyes moved toward me. The guild recessed for 2 hours. While we waited, Isolde cornered me beside a rack of retired cannon molds. You are humiliating Celeste over a broken engagement, she said. The guildmaster asked her a commercial question. You could authorize the 6 ships and argue about money later. That is how every temporary use became a permanent entitlement. Those yards grew because the royal family trusted you. They grew because people worked in them. You sound like a pamphlet writer. You sound like someone who never read an invoice. She flushed. Isolde enjoyed commissioning weapons, but she did not enjoy learning how long iron took to arrive or what happened when a worker lost 3 fingers. If Lucien fails, she said, Seraphine will never forgive you. She forged my surrender, her forgiveness is no longer a resource I need. When the guild returned, Master Pell divided the rights precisely. Existing warships retained their licenses, the crown owned the first prototype and every drawing explicitly purchased under wartime appropriations. The final brace remained jointly registered to Hiromir and its named engineers. No new hull could use it without their approval and payment, and the 6 frigates did not have approval. The order took effect immediately at South Yard, where Lucien's ceremonial flagship sat on its launch rails beneath royal banners. Hundreds of guests had gathered for the naming, but when the guild courier delivered the ruling, the yard master removed the certification flag. Without that flag, no insurer would cover the vessel, and no naval officer could accept it. Lucien waited on the platform for 40 minutes before the crowd understood that the ship would not move. The northern ambassador folded his copy of the purchase agreement and left by sunset. Paintings of the stranded flagship appeared in print shops across the capital. Marianne ordered the Gazette not to publish them, but that only made them more valuable. The ruling did not make me richer, no royalties had been set, and the delayed contract cost Hiromir hundreds of paid hours, but it returned the decision to the people who owned the work. At the next Royal Council session, the sisters stopped pretending to agree. Isolde blamed Celeste for promising ships before the patent transfer, Celeste blamed Seraphine for assuring her my signature was certain. Beatrice warned that without the foreign deposit, the bond renewal could fail. Marianne demanded a stronger public response before the stranded ship became the symbol of Lucien's reign. Helena said little, she was studying the bank disclosures. Gideon sent me a copy that evening, and attached to Lucien's loan application was a summary titled The 5 Lamp Settlement. It promised Seraphine permanent chairmanship of the Royal Council, Beatrice authority over customs, Helena chief treaty minister, Marianne control of the National Printing Office, and Isolde direction of all military procurement. The summary did not yet prove that my sisters had signed it, the bank had received it from Lucien's office, not from a public registry, but it explained why 5 women who could not inherit had chosen a man they expected to control. The crown was not their gift to Lucien, it was the price he agreed to pay them. The next morning, Seraphine issued an emergency defense order placing Hiromir Naval Works under temporary royal administration. She was finished asking me to cooperate. Royal troops entered South Yard before dawn. They did not break gates or threaten workers. They arrived with an official order, a payroll officer, and enough armed men to make resistance foolish. By 7, the falcon flag flew over all 3 Hiromir yards. I learned about the seizure when my steward reached my townhouse with sawdust on his coat. They removed your managers, he said. The main records room is sealed. Captain Kent has command of the harbor entrance. The royal officer promised Friday payment. Promised from which account? I asked, but he did not say. I rode to South Yard with 2 legal clerks and no guards. Workers crowded the fence, some raised their caps, others watched without expression. A family could not buy bread with loyalty to a disputed prince. Elias met me at the gate. The emergency order bars former directors from entering, he said. Former? That is the language in the order. The charter court has not removed me. I know. Then you know the order assumes the disputed conclusion. I also know it carries the council seal and an active defense designation. I cannot overrule it at a gate. Behind him, royal clerks carried ledgers out of my office. Those books include private guild records, I said. They are being sealed, not destroyed. Under whose inventory? Mine. I looked at the man who had once followed me through cannon smoke. Will your inventory identify every book and every person who touches it? Yes. Will you give a copy to the charter court? He hesitated. If the court orders it. I will obtain the order, Elias said, and he lowered his voice. Do not ask me to open this gate. I could have reminded him who had promoted him. I could have called the veterans in the crowd and turned a legal dispute into a military confrontation. Seraphine might even have wanted that one image of my men pushing royal guards would justify every accusation Marianne had printed. I am not asking, I said, and I handed him written notice that I did not consent to the seizure and that I held the crown responsible for wages, materials, safety, and contract penalties from that hour forward. He signed the receipt, and the gates remained closed. By noon, the Gazette announced that Lucien had saved 2,000 jobs from my political blockade, printing a drawing of him shaking hands with shipwrights beneath the new flag. Several workers actually cheered him. The royal payroll officer had promised bonuses and immediate work on the 6 frigates. People wanted certainty more than they wanted to understand patent law. That afternoon, Lord Coe and Lady Wren withdrew their support for my succession petition. Both held shares in firms supplying the yards, and they said a prolonged dispute endangered national defense and private savings. North Coast Bank postponed Haramir's ordinary operating credit until the court clarified who controlled the company. Timber merchants suspended deliveries rather than risk sending goods to the wrong buyer. For the first time since the Hall of Crowns, I had no immediate answer. Seraphine came to the yard that evening. She remained inside the gate while I stood outside it, with Marianne's artists positioned to draw us in their preferred poses. Recognize Lucien, and the order expires tonight, Seraphine said. Then the seizure is coercion, not defense. It is continuity. The fleet cannot depend on your moods. The existing fleet has every license and supply contract it needs. The future fleet does not pay for the patents and submit lawful orders. Her face hardened. You would charge your own kingdom while foreign powers rebuild. The workers charge wages, iron merchants charge for iron. Why should engineers alone prove loyalty by surrendering ownership? Because you are a prince. According to you, I am not. That line reached the watching workers. A few laughed before royal officers silenced them. Seraphine stepped closer to the bars. You think a judge will hand you a crown after you embarrass every institution required to support it? I think institutions should survive embarrassment. Father knew when truth had to wait. Father is not the one asking me to sign a lie. She turned away, and I watched my own office windows glow after dark while other people searched my records. The loss was not symbolic. Production invoices, testing failures, supplier terms, and payroll disputes sat in those rooms. Even with the lies documenting access, knowledge could be copied, and decisions could be delayed. My townhouse filled with anxious managers. Horace reported that 7 senior engineers refused to enter under royal control, and the new administrators threatened to replace them. The Workers' Council asked whether Hiramir would cover wages if the crown failed. I could not promise money without access to the company accounts. That was the trap. If I paid, Seraphine would use my money while keeping my yards. If I refused, workers would blame me. I gave the council a narrower answer. I will fund an emergency food reserve for workers whose wages are missed. I will not pay the crown's payroll while it controls production. It was not enough to calm everyone. On Friday, wages arrived 3 hours late. The Treasury paid them with a short-term advance from Crown and Anchor Bank, secured by projected income from the unfinished frigates. Ships that could not legally launch were now collateral for wages used to build them. Lucien had bought 1 week of applause by increasing the problem. Still, he had the yards, the flag, the workers, and the Gazette. I had court petitions that could take months. That night, I unfolded a map of every institution holding copies of our records. The Crown controlled the main office, but it did not control the Guild patent vault. Bank files, customs entries, court registries, supplier invoices, or the Independent Safety Board. Seraphine had seized the building because she believed the building contained the business. I would prove that control without accountability was only possession, and possession could become liability very quickly. The first failure came from a box of iron bolts. South Yard had ordered them from a Hiromir supplier 2 months earlier. Under our contract, delivery required inspection by a guild-certified engineer and payment through the company account. The royal administrator had neither authority. He ordered the supplier to unload anyway. The supplier refused. Lucien's office called it sabotage. The supplier produced the contract and asked who would insure defective materials if he ignored it. No one answered. The same problem repeated with oak beams, pump valves, sailcloth, and furnace coal. The crown possessed the yards, but every commercial relationship still had terms. Seraphine could issue a decree. She could not rewrite hundreds of contracts without creating hundreds of claims. On the 9th day, the royal payroll failed. Beatrice had expected a foreign deposit from the Northern Frigate Agreement. The buyers withheld it after the guild ruling. Crown and Anchor Bank refused another advance unless the Treasury disclosed both customs pledges. Workers left their stations at noon and gathered outside the administration office. I opened the emergency food stores as promised. Each household received flour, beans, lamp oil, and a written statement that the aid did not waive unpaid wage claims against the royal administration. Narayan's Gazette called it an attempt to purchase worker loyalty. The workers did not care what she called it, their children ate. I filed for neutral administration before the Naval Readiness Tribunal. My petition did not ask the tribunal to return the yards to me. It asked for a trustee with authority to pay wages, honor valid supplier contracts, and preserve disputed records until ownership was settled. Seraphine opposed the request because a trustee would expose the failure of her emergency order. Lucien opposed it because a trustee would stop construction on his flagship. The Workers' Council supported it because neither side had earned the right to use their wages as leverage. Elias testified on the 3rd day. He did not praise me. He submitted production numbers before seizure. South Yard completed an average of 27 structural sections per week under royal control. It had completed 9, all rejected because no guild engineer had certified the iron. Materials worth 70,000 crowns sat outside the gates. Wages were 5 days overdue. Did Prince Rowan order any worker to stop? The royal advocate asked. No. Did his guild associates refuse to work? They refused to certify work outside their registered authority. Is that not the same result? No, one is a labor decision. The other is a professional requirement that existed before this dispute. The tribunal appointed Lydia Crane, a commercial trustee with no royal household position. She received temporary control of payroll, procurement, and safety. The royal flag remained above the yard because the underlying seizure had not yet been voided, but Seraphine kept the appearance while losing the accounts. Lydia's first report showed that Lucien's administrators had charged ceremony costs for the failed launch to the shipbuilding budget. Her second showed that they had ordered patented components without licenses. Her third demanded a complete inventory of every record removed from my office. Elias delivered his list. One document was not on it. A patent transfer order had appeared in the records room after the original inventory, claiming I had assigned the final hull brace to the Crown 3 years earlier. The order carried my seal and Gideon's audit signature. Gideon examined the number at the top of the page. This series was used for quarterly ration reports, he said, not patents. Could the clerk have selected the wrong form? Lydia asked. The series ended last year. This paper claims to be 3 years old. The pale crown falcon showed when she lifted it toward the window, the same post-war paper, the same attempt to create an older decision. This time we could also prove when the document entered the room. Elias had sealed the cabinet on the morning of the seizure. His access book recorded every opening. Only 4 people had entered: Lydia, a court clerk, Lucien's patent advisor, and Celeste. Celeste had visited under authority of the treaty office to inspect documents relevant to the Northern Agreement. She denied bringing the page, and Lucien's advisor denied it too. Lydia sent the document to the seal office and barred both from further access. I did not accuse either publicly. The evidence showed opportunity, not authorship, and I had learned from Seraphine what happened when a desired conclusion came before the record. Instead, I asked the commercial court to compare the new transfer with the original renunciation. The court expanded its preservation order. Every royal office that possessed a disputed succession or patent document had to file a numbered copy within 48 hours. Destroying, replacing, or concealing one after that notice would become a separate offense. Seraphine's seizure had created a result she had never intended. Before she took the yard, the forged renunciation was one suspicious paper locked inside a royal archive. After she took it, a second forgery appeared inside a controlled room, linked by paper, numbering, access logs, and purpose. She had tried to increase control, she had increased traceability. The trustee restored full wages from Haramir's operating revenue, not from royal debt. Supplier deliveries resumed for repairs and existing licensed vessels. Work on Lucien's 6 frigates remained suspended. Workers pulled down the ceremonial banners around the stranded flagship because they interfered with cranes. Nobody asked Lucien. When I visited under the trustee's supervision, the same men who had cheered him returned to their stations without cheering me. I preferred it that way. They were working under enforceable contracts, not choosing a prince. Elias met me beside the dry dock. I thought you would ask the tribunal to punish me for obeying an order, for keeping you outside. You recorded what happened inside, that mattered more, I said. He looked toward the royal flag. If the succession court confirms Lucien, I will swear to him. I know. And if it confirms you, I will swear to you. I know that too. He finally saluted, not as my subordinate, but as one officer acknowledging another. That evening, the Royal Seal Office notified the court that its first examination was complete. The wax on my alleged renunciation came from the correct royal formula, but the seal that pressed it did not exist on the date written at the top of the page. Master Maeve Hart brought 3 steel boxes into the succession court. She opened the first to reveal the old royal seal matrix. Its falcon faced left, and the crown above it had 5 narrow points. She opened the second box. The newer falcon faced forward with a 6-pointed crown, adopted after the armistice. The seal on my renunciation matched the second matrix. When did it enter service? Judge Vin asked. The 5th day of April last year, Maeve said. What is the date on the disputed declaration? The 12th day of October, 3 years earlier. Seraphine's advocate repeated Lucien's explanation that the page was a later certified copy of an earlier decision. Maeve opened the third box, containing registers showing every certified copy created with the new seal. A certified copy must identify the original, the copying clerk, and the date of certification, she said. This page identifies none of them. Its text says signed and sealed on the older date. It presents itself as an original. The Crown Paper Mill supervisor testified next. The Crown Falcon watermark had been introduced in the same month as the new seal. Purchase records showed that the Royal Council Archive received its first package 12 days later. I remembered Lucien's thumb covering the paper corner in the Hall of Crowns. At the time, it had looked like ordinary nervousness. Now, the reason was in the record. The court did not yet name the person who created the page. It ruled that the document could not have been executed on its stated date and therefore could not prove my renunciation. Lucien's provisional title remained because the alleged acknowledgement by father required separate review, but the legal structure beneath him lost its first support. Outside the court, crowds filled the square. Some shouted my name. Others demanded the entire monarchy be dissolved. I refused to address either group from the steps. Evidence did not become stronger because a crowd liked it. Celeste requested a private meeting in a conference room used by court advocates. I agreed on the condition that a clerk record our attendance, though not our conversation. She placed her treaty office credentials on the table. Seraphine suspended me. She claims my access to the patent room created the appearance of misconduct. It did. I did not place that transfer order in the cabinet. Then the access review may clear you. You know I would not forge your signature. 7 weeks ago I would have said I knew several things. She absorbed that without looking away. I reviewed the continuity charter. I advised them on the trust transfer. I believed the renunciation had already been authenticated. You were present when the archive box was opened. I was invited after the outer seal had been broken. The declaration was on the table when I entered. Yet you told me you saw a summary because I knew how it would sound. It sounded better than the truth. I was trying to preserve some possibility between us. You were holding Lucien's hand while asking me to transfer my property. Her composure cracked. I made a political decision based on official information. You act as if I betrayed you for a necklace. The reward was a crown. That does not make it less of a choice. She opened her portfolio and showed me an annotated draft beside the succession clauses. Seraphine had written that my voluntary public consent was essential because litigation over Hiromir could last years. She always knew the council could not transfer your property alone, Celeste said. I knew that from the charter they handed me. This proves they expected your signature, not that they planned to forge it. Why show it to me? Because Seraphine intends to blame the documents on Lucien's dead father and the archive clerks, she will say the family acted in good faith.
And what do you intend to say?
That I acted on the council's assurances. She was not confessing, she was selecting the safest truthful portion of her conduct. I asked whether the annotated draft existed in the official treaty office file. She said yes.
Then submit it through the court. If I do, Lucien will end our engagement.
You chose him because he was crown prince. If you believe he is still lawful, stand beside him. And if you no longer believe that, then tell the truth because it is true, not because you want another arrangement with me.
She left with the draft.
2 days later, the treaty office filed it in response to the preservation order Celeste had chosen to protect herself from a concealment charge. The result still helped my case, but I did not confuse usefulness with loyalty.
The alleged acknowledgement of Lucien now came under examination.
Unlike my renunciation, it used paper and wax available on the stated date.
Its defect was less obvious.
It claimed father signed it at Castle Dorian on the 14th of June during the final year of the war. The witness lines named Lucien's father and a palace chaplain who had since retired. The royal travel ledger showed father at Castle Dorian that week. For the first time, one of their central documents appeared possible. Lucien walked out of court smiling. Seraphine told the Gazette that one clerical copying error did not erase father's blood. Then Gideon sent me a classification order from the Treasury Archive showing that on the same date father allegedly signed the acknowledgement, Lucien's father had authorized a payment from St. Orlan 100 miles away. One man could not have witnessed a royal signature in Dorian and certified a payment in the capital before noon. The page did not settle the question by itself, it gave us the next place to look.
Lucien answered the travel contradiction by attacking my birth at an emergency session of the Royal Council.
He produced an altered copy of the palace birth register. A line beside my name stated that the attending physician had not verified royal paternity. Lucien demanded that the succession court review both claims under the same standard. Marianne's Gazette printed the accusation before the court received it. For 2 days, the capital discussed whether any of the late king's children were legitimate.
Foreign banks delayed payments, provincial governors asked which seal they should obey.
The damage was real, even if the claim failed.
Seraphine expected me to object on dignity and make myself look afraid of scrutiny. Instead, I filed the original request for review. If blood is the basis of this contest, I told the court, mine belongs under the same light. The decision carried risk old records were incomplete.
My mother had given birth during a winter epidemic when half the palace staff were absent. If my sisters had altered more than one ledger, the inquiry could trap us in months of uncertainty.
We began with records already cited in my childhood settlement. The temple birth notice, the Assembly's infant support appropriation, father's public declaration at my naming, and the original physician's account book preserved by the medical college.
The palace copy submitted by Lucien had a sentence that the other 4 did not. Maeve examined its binding. The altered page had been removed and reattached with modern thread. The ink in the questionable line contained a blue stabilizer introduced only 8 years earlier.
My legitimacy had not merely survived scrutiny. Lucien had submitted another altered record after the preservation order.
Judge Vin referred the new page for criminal investigation and warned both parties that further use of knowingly false material could result in immediate detention. Lucien claimed an unknown clerk had delivered it to his office.
Did you ask where it came from? I questioned him during the hearing.
My legal secretary handled receipt.
Did you compare it with the register already cited in my settlement? I relied on staff. Did you direct the Gazette to publish it before filing?
He looked toward Marianne. She stared at her papers. The public had a right to know, Lucien said, but the court knew he had no useful answer.
The financial inquiry moved faster.
North Coast Bank and Crown and Anchor Bank appeared before the commercial court with their duplicate customs agreements. Each demanded priority, and each also demanded disclosure of every side arrangement used to support Lucien's accession loans. The full 5-lamp settlement emerged from a notary-sealed deposit. It had not appeared from nowhere. Its summary had accompanied the first loan. The bank had required Lucien to deposit a certified
copy with an independent notary in case the promised offices and estates were needed to guarantee political support.
All 5 of my sisters had signed it. Seraphine would remain council chair for life. Beatrice would control customs without annual assembly approval. Helena would receive authority to conclude treaties carrying commercial privileges. Marianne would supervise licenses for every national newspaper.
Isolde would direct military procurement and appoint yard inspectors. In return, they promised to recognize Lucien, present the alleged acknowledgement, and secure my public consent to the continuity charter.
My consent was listed as an expected asset, and so were Celeste's trust shares. The settlement also let Lucien pledge specific royal properties if the loans failed. One schedule included Helena's country estate as supplementary collateral, even though she had authorized only the income from it. Helena read the schedule in court and went completely still. That evening, she requested a private audience with Seraphine. The palace walls kept their words private, but the result was public. The next morning, Helena filed the notary's meeting minutes and asked the commercial court to limit her liability in exchange for complete disclosure. She did not apologize to me, she did not claim a sudden discovery of conscience. She stated that Lucien had exceeded the collateral authority she granted him, that Seraphine had assured the sisters my signature was guaranteed, and that she would not risk her children's inheritance for an agreement that no longer protected her. Her testimony confirmed the settlement's negotiation history. It also showed where the alleged acknowledgement had entered their plan. At the first meeting, Seraphine described it as a royal family record awaiting formal retrieval. At the second, Lucien reported that the archive committee had found it. At the third, Celeste warned that both the acknowledgement and my renunciation required independent validation before foreign governments would rely on them. Seraphine had answered that my signature on the continuity charter would make further examination politically unnecessary. They had not begun with proof, they had begun with the expectation that I would close the gap. Helena's disclosure fractured the five sisters in public. Beatrice accused her of sacrificing the kingdom to save one estate. Marianne's editors began removing Helena from official paintings. Isolde resigned from the council session rather than vote on a motion condemning her. Seraphine remained composed. She announced that the provisional prince's national oath ceremony would take place in 7 days, before the courts completed their work. The realm cannot be held hostage by endless technical challenges, her proclamation said. The oath was meant to turn uncertainty into obedience once governors, admirals, judges, and cities knelt to Lucien. Seraphine believes no court would risk undoing the act. I read the proclamation twice, then I asked Elias to bring me the military oath statute and every national oath book. Lucien wanted a public ceremony. I would make sure the public saw exactly who possessed lawful authority and who possessed only a decorated chair. The national oath ceremony required more than people kneeling in a room. Each institution received a numbered writ. Its representative entered that number beside the oath, signed the national book, and returned a matching copy to the court of succession without the court's validation mark. The oath expressed personal loyalty but transferred no legal command. Seraphine sent the writs without the mark. Most recipients knew the difference. Many also knew that refusing a palace summons could end a career if Lucien survived the challenge. I did not ask anyone to boycott the ceremony. I sent each institution a certified copy of Judge Vin's order prohibiting irreversible oaths until review ended. I included the relevant statute in one sentence: choose according to your office, not according to me. The night before the ceremony, Celeste came to Hiromir House for the last time. She no longer had a key. A servant announced her, and we met in the front drawing room with the doors open. She wore no engagement pin from either man. Lucien ended our arrangement this morning, she said. I heard, after she filed Seraphine's annotated draft. Lucien accused her of helping me undermine the succession. The man she had selected for stability discarded her the moment her self-protection threatened him. He is losing control, she said. Seraphine plans to have the royal guard swear first. Once the generals follow, the governors will not resist. The generals know the statute, they also know who controls promotions. She placed a folder on the table. I can testify that Seraphine knew the documents were unverified. I can explain every clause of the continuity charter. In return, I want the trust dispute settled privately and my treaty office position protected. You are offering evidence already in the court file. My testimony gives it meaning. Then testify because you participated. Her face tightened. You would rather destroy me than accept help. You keep describing consequences as destruction whenever they reach you. I made one decision. You reviewed the papers, you designed the transfer, you lied about when you saw them, you chose Lucien publicly. You entered the seized archive, you delayed disclosure until your own position became unsafe. That is not one decision. She looked toward the empty place above the fireplace where our marriage portrait was supposed to hang. If you become crown prince again, you will need a consort who understands government. I understood then that she still considered our relationship a vacancy she might refill. I need a partner who understands that access is not ownership. That position is no longer open, I said. She left the folder. I sent it unopened to the court clerk. who found copies of correspondence already preserved by the treaty office. At noon the next day, bells rang across St. Orland. Delegates entered the Hall of Crowns beneath banners bearing Lucien's new crest. Seraphine had placed the provisional chair on the first step below the throne, making it appear higher without technically moving it onto the royal platform.
Lucien wore father's ceremonial naval sword.
I took a seat among the petitioners without a sash or weapon.
The royal guard commander approached first. His unit belonged to the household and could swear under Seraphine's authority.
He knelt, signed the palace book, and touched Lucien's sword. Applause filled the galleries.
3 noble household regiments followed, as did Marianne's national printing office and Beatrice's treasury staff. Each oath increased Lucien's confidence.
Then General Orand approached on behalf of the national army. The clerk presented the oath book, and Orand inspected the written number.
"Where is the court validation?" he asked. Seraphine rose. "The council has authorized emergency substitution under the national continuity power."
Judge Vin sat with the judicial delegates.
"No substitution request was submitted to this court."
Seraphine's voice sharpened.
"This is a royal ceremony, not a hearing."
"Then the general may make a personal vow. He may not transfer statutory command," Judge Vin said.
Orand closed the book.
"I will swear when the writ is lawful." He returned to his place without kneeling.
Elias came next for the Navy. He carried 6 regional oath books. Every signature line was blank.
"The Navy continues to obey the government's active operational orders," he said.
"It cannot swear personal allegiance while the succession injunction remains in force."
The 3 major port delegates refused for the same reason. The Engineers Guild declined. 11 provincial governors requested delay.
Even 2 judges appointed by Seraphine would not sign an invalid writ. Lucien looked down at the half-filled hall.
"These people are defying the crown," he said. "They are waiting to learn who holds it," I answered. He drew father's sword halfway from its scabbard. Guards moved toward me, but I remained seated. "If you arrest a petitioner during a protected succession review," Judge Vin said, "the court will suspend every household writ issued today."
Lucien's hand froze on the sword.
Seraphine whispered to him, and whatever she said made him release it. The ceremony ended without a national oath. The palace regiments had promised loyalty, but the institutions that controlled the army, navy, ports, courts, and shipyards had promised only to obey existing law. Outside, thousands had gathered to hear the bells marking a confirmed heir. The bells stopped early. Lucien had wanted a visible fact that no judge could reverse. Instead, he gave the kingdom a visible measurement of everything he did not control.
The Court of Succession scheduled the final great review for the following week.
That night, Lucien filed a declaration blaming every disputed document on Seraphine and the Archive Committee. 2 hours later, Seraphine filed a statement saying Lucien had personally supplied them.
Their alliance lasted exactly as long as their confidence in victory.
The great review began beneath the same carved falcon that had watched Lucien take my chair. This time the throne room held no banquet tables and no musicians. Judges occupied the platform, assembly peers sat on one side, city and military delegates on the other, representatives, guild masters, workers, and foreign observers filled the galleries.
Lucien sat at the respondents' table.
Seraphine sat separately with our other sisters. Celeste sat behind the treaty office advocate. The provisional chair had been removed. Seraphine spoke first. She admitted procedural mistakes but argued that the council acted to prevent a disputed succession from becoming a national collapse. Rowan devoted his life to the Navy. His wartime declaration confirmed what his conduct already showed. He wanted command without the ceremonial burden of the throne.
Lucien offered continuity among the royal household, the assembly, and our foreign partners. She made my exile from my own inheritance sound like a promotion.
Lucien's advocate took a different path. He claimed that the recognition document came from the Archive Committee and that Lucien had reasonably relied on 5 princesses, the treaty office, and the royal legal staff. He blamed the duplicate customs pledges on Beatrice and the altered birth register on an unnamed clerk. Celeste's counsel described her as a diplomat deceived by competing royal claims.
Each defense required someone else to carry the final blame.
When my turn came, I did not begin with Celeste leaving me or Lucien sitting in my chair. I placed the continuity charter on the central table.
"This is what they wanted me to sign," I said.
If the succession documents were already valid,
they did not need my consent to make Lucien crown prince. They needed it to transfer property, cure disputed authority, preserve loans, and prevent review. I asked the court to examine 5 questions in order. First, had I surrendered the succession?
Maeve placed the 2 seal matrices side by side, the later matrix, the post-war paper, the false original date, the Epson copy registry, and my wartime signature protocol all pointed in the same direction. No single detail carried the case. Together, they made the declaration impossible. The court ruled that I had not renounced. Second, was Lucien father's acknowledged son? The alleged acknowledgement placed father and Lucien's father at Castle Dorian on the same day. Father's travel was proven, but the witness's presence was not. Gideon presented the original treasury payment book from St. Orlan. Lucien's father had signed 4 disbursements there that morning and attended a customs appeal in the afternoon. The appeal minutes listed 12 people, including 2 merchants who had submitted statements months earlier before anyone knew the date would matter. The retired chaplain's temple log showed he conducted 3 funerals in a western village that day. His ordinary service records had been deposited annually for 20 years. Nobody had created them for this hearing. Both named witnesses were elsewhere. The paper itself was old enough, but Maeve found that the wax contained a flex from the newer seal cleaning compound. The document had been made with old materials after the new matrix entered service. Lucien's lawyer argued that father might still have acknowledged him in another place or on another day. Judge Vin said, perhaps, but this court decides evidence, not possibilities. The alleged acknowledgement failed. Third, who planned to benefit? The bank notary read the 5-lamp settlement. My sister's signatures were verified against public records. The agreement listed their offices, estates, budget powers, and my expected consent. Helena testified because the court had limited her civil exposure in exchange for complete disclosure. She confirmed that Seraphine repeatedly said I would sign to protect the fleet and the family name. Did Prince Rowan ever authorize you to make that promise? I asked. No. Why did you believe it? She looked at me for the first time. Because you always carried the cost when the rest of us could not agree. It was the closest any sister came to admitting the real design. Fourth, what had Lucien done with the authority they gave him? The banks presented the duplicate customs pledges. Lucien had signed both contracts 31 days apart. The second application contained a question asking whether any prior claim covered the same revenue. He had answered no in his own handwriting. He stood abruptly. Beatrice told me the first loan would be retired. Beatrice rose from the other table. You signed before the retirement payment cleared because Seraphine said Rowan's guarantee would cover the difference. Seraphine's calm finally broke. You assured us the banks had accepted the transition. You assured me Rowan would kneel. Their voices crossed until Judge Vin struck the bell. The lie had been cooperative while the reward seemed secure. Under consequence, cooperation became accusation. Fifth, what property and authority had actually transferred? The answer was almost nothing. The betrothal trust had terminated Celeste's voting rights the moment she publicly accepted Lucien. The guild charter protected the final hull design. Haramir's estates required my consent or a court judgment. The National Oath statute barred military transfer during review. The royal administration of my yards had been placed under neutral trust after failing to pay workers. Their continuity charter was a list of things they expected me to surrender, not things they owned. Celeste testified last. She confirmed she had reviewed the documents before the Hall of Crowns and had drafted the trust transfer language. She said Seraphine assured her validation would follow. Why did you tell me you learned of the decision that morning? I asked, and her fingers tightened around the rail. Because I wanted you to believe my choice followed the final ruling. Had there been a final ruling? No. Did anyone force you to accept Lucien? No. Did anyone force you to request my shipyard shares after accepting him? No. I had loved her for 7 years. I did not need to call her names. 3 honest answers did more than anger could have done. The judges and assembly delegates withdrew for 4 hours. When they returned, every person in the hall stood. Judge Vin read the findings. My renunciation was void because it was fabricated. Lucien's acknowledgement was invalid because its execution record was false. His provisional title ended immediately. My lawful position as crown prince was restored, subject to the same assembly confirmation that had been pending before the conspiracy. The 5-lamp settlement conveyed no offices or property. The shipyards remained under neutral administration until the seizure damages were calculated. Then would return to their registered owners. The national military oath process would restart only after confirmation. Lucien's lending conduct and use of altered documents went to the Royal Criminal Court. Seraphine's emergency seizure and obstruction went to the High Administrative Court. Beatrice faced an independent treasury audit. Celeste faced professional review for breach of trust and unauthorized disclosure of protected designs. The rulings were not applause. They changed who could sign, spend, command, and own. Seraphine requested permission to address me before the session ended. Keep the family united, she said.
allow us to retain advisory seats. We will publicly support your confirmation.
You are offering to support the position the court just restored. A king needs his blood, a government needs boundaries, I said.
Celeste stepped forward next. Without Lucien's title, our original marriage would once again look politically convenient. We could repair what happened. I will accept any trust limits you require.
The hall became quiet.
You chose Lucien before any final ruling, I said.
You helped them take my property because you believed he would win. I accept that choice. I will not reverse mine. I turned to the clerk and signed the formal rejection of the continuity charter in the same place where they had expected my surrender. That signature ended the matter more completely than the word fine ever could. Restoring a title took 1 afternoon, restoring the damage took 3 years. The assembly confirmed me as Crown Prince 12 days after the Great Review. I accepted under a revised Succession Act requiring every future renunciation to be witnessed by judges, registered publicly, and confirmed after 30 days.
No royal family council could again convert a disputed private page into a national command overnight.
I did not move into the palace. My principal residence remained Hiromere House above the eastern shipyard, where gulls woke me before servants did, and every window carried a thin coat of salt by winter. I kept a modest capital apartment for assembly sessions. The rooms Celeste had selected for our married household became offices for the Independent Naval Accounts Board. The neutral trustee returned. The 3 yards after calculating the seizure losses, the royal administration had created unpaid invoices, damaged 2 experimental frames, and delayed commercial repairs. The Crown paid compensation from the discretionary household fund, not from naval wages or new public loans. Hiromere recovered its board authority, patents, supplier contracts, and operating accounts. The company was profitable again by the following spring, but the victory did not make me suddenly limitless. Legal costs, delayed orders, and repair expenses consumed much of the first year's income. I drew a published salary from the yards and placed my Crown Prince allowance under annual audit.
The 6 disputed
frigates were renegotiated rather than abandoned. The northern delegation paid a proper license. Engineers received named royalties. The Crown paid for the vessels through an assembly-approved defense budget. 4 ships were built, 2 were cancelled because the government could not justify their cost. For the first time, reducing an order was treated as budgeting rather than treason.
Lucien's criminal
trial lasted 8 months. The court could not prove that his blood claim was false in every possible sense, but it did prove that he knowingly used a fabricated acknowledgement, submitted an altered birth record after receiving a preservation order,
and pledged the same customs revenue to 2 banks while denying the earlier claim.
He was convicted of fraudulent borrowing, use of forged royal instruments, and obstruction of a succession review. He received 6 years in a state fortress, not a private dungeon, and was ordered to repay the personal portion of the accession loans. His St. Vale estate was sold, the proceeds paid the banks, unpaid suppliers, and workers harmed by the yard seizure. He lost what he valued most, not comfort, but the right to present himself as a man cheated of a crown. The judgment recorded that he had been offered a lawful opportunity to submit his claim and had chosen falsified authority instead. I visited him once before sentencing at his request. "If you had been born in my place, you would have done the same," he said through the interview screen.
"No, I might have wanted what you wanted. I would not have owned it by wanting. You still got everything.
I got back what you took. Those are not the same thing."
I did not visit again.
Seraphine's case produced no prison term. Investigators could not prove she physically created the false pages. And she had not received money from the duplicate loans. They proved that she concealed validation warnings, used emergency power to seize disputed property, and attempted to force my signature by threatening national instability. She lost the chairmanship she had held for 14 years. The assembly abolished her permanent council seat and removed her authority to appoint household officials. 30% of her estate income entered a 5-year restitution trust for shipyard losses and improper royal expenses. She retained her title, her home, and enough wealth to live comfortably. What she lost was control. Invitations still called her Princess Seraphine, but no decree waited for her approval, and no minister needed her permission to speak to me. She wrote 3 letters asking for a family dinner. I answered once. Official matters would pass through the council office. Private contact would resume only if I wanted it. 3 years later, I had not wanted it. Beatrice's audit found that she had hidden palace expenses inside military refinancing but had not taken the money personally. She was removed as royal treasurer, ordered to repay unauthorized benefits from her own allowance, and barred from public finance for life. She became administrator of a small family estate where every expense finally belonged to a budget she could not transfer to me. Helena surrendered the treaty powers and country land promised in the Five-Lamp settlement. Her cooperation protected her children's original estate from Lucien's debt, but she was barred from treaty service for 10 years. She had chosen disclosure to save herself. The court credited that choice without rewriting it as courage. Marianne lost control of the Gazette and the national printing licenses. An independent board published corrections beside every article that had falsely claimed I cancelled active fleet supplies. She kept writing political essays under her own name. Readers could decide their value without a royal office forcing every city to print them. Isolde was removed from military procurement for trying to commission unlicensed ships and replace certified engineers with political appointees. She retained a ceremonial artillery regiment but no purchasing power. The woman who enjoyed naming weapons now had no authority to order one bolt. Celeste's professional hearing was civil, not criminal. She had not been proven to plant the forged transfer order. But she had breached the betrothal trust, accessed protected designs for a transaction benefiting her intended second marriage, and concealed her prior knowledge during a national announcement. She lost every unvested trust share and paid damages equal to the treaty office's unauthorized use of the designs. She was barred from royal or diplomatic office for 8 years. Her father settled the family's portion without bankruptcy. But the queenly future she had chosen Lucien to secure was gone permanently. She sent me a final letter after the ruling, writing that ambition had made her confuse standing beside power with building a life. She did not ask for money, but she did ask whether time might allow us to begin again. I answered in 4 sentences. I did not hate her, I accepted her legal restitution, I wished her a useful life. Our relationship would not resume. Forgiveness could end a private argument, it could not restore access. Gideon became the first director of the Independent Naval Accounts Board. Elias remained in active command and later became admiral through the ordinary promotion process. I did not reward him for choosing me because he had never chosen me. He had chosen the law even when it kept me outside my own gate. That was exactly the kind of officer the fleet needed. The yards changed, 2 patents were separated from royal commissions. Every emergency order named its funding account, duration, safety authority, and appeal process. Engineers could not block urgent repairs over a royalty dispute, but the crown could not turn emergency use into permanent ownership. I submitted my own offices to those rules. Some old courtiers considered it humiliating for a restored crown prince to publish expenses and recuse himself from contracts involving Hiromir. I considered it evidence that I had learned the right lesson. The purpose of defeating arbitrary power was not to reserve it for myself. 3 years after the Hall of Crowns, the first properly licensed northern frigate was ready to launch. Workers, assembly delegates, sailors, and guild engineers gathered at South Yard. No portrait of Lucien remained. The old Royal Falcon and the Hiromir anchor flew at equal height. Minutes before the ceremony, a clerk discovered that the Treasury's final payment approval lacked one required counter-signature. Everyone looked at me. In the past, I would have signed a private guarantee, told the yard to proceed, and spent the next year repairing the account. That habit had trained my family to believe responsibility meant I would always absorb their failures. Delay the launch, I said. The Treasury Minister protested that foreign guests were already seated. Then they can watch a government complete its paperwork, I replied. The missing official arrived 40 minutes later. He reviewed the payment, signed it, and accepted responsibility in the public register. Only then did the yard master raise the certification flag. The ship entered the water to the sound of bells and workers shouting from the docks. I had recovered my succession, my estates, my patents, my income, and my public name. More importantly, Hiromir no longer depended on my private sacrifice, and the kingdom no longer treated my loyalty as an account it could spend without permission. My sisters had believed I would keep carrying them because I always had. They were right about the man I had been. They had built their entire plan on never meeting the man who finally said enough. If your 5 sisters replaced you with a false heir and your fiancé helped them take your life's work, would you have challenged the crown or walked away from the entire family? Were Seraphine's loss of power and Lucien's prison sentence enough, or should every sister have faced harsher consequences? Tell us where loyalty should end when the people closest to you treat it as permission to use you.